welcome back, everybody. Or welcome to the first episode you listened to. I don't know, it's only our second episode, so.
Well, if you listened to us before, welcome back. If you're new, welcome.
Right, this is Blood on the Mic with David.
And Lacey. I guess we're going with our...
Yeah, I mean, that's how we refer to each other, so.
Yeah.
Not to confuse anybody. But we are doing this podcast to discuss some music in depth. And later on, we will be having some interviews with some musicians, some folks. But
not later on in this episode.
Not
later on in the podcast. We have nobody yet, so don't get your hopes up.
Right, we're just trying to set expectations of what it is this channel that you're probably stumbling onto.
When there's not a global pandemic, we might get somebody to come by and talk to them.
Or possibly before that, if we can get somebody on the phone. But we'll have to look more.
That would be cool.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to look more into that. All right, but today, is there anything in particular we want to say before we get started on our main topic?
No, I mean, we're just starting out, so, the point of the podcast is really to talk about different topics in music. It doesn't have to be, necessarily topical, we're going to talk about Fiona Apple. She did release an album this year, but, we'll talk about anything. I don't care, as long as it's related to music. So, to our no listeners right now, anybody listening to the podcast, if you have any recommendations, something you want us to talk about, follow us on Twitter at, I think it's at Blood on the Mic. Might be at Blood on the Mic 1. You know what? Next episode, I'll tell you what the exact title is. Right, or maybe at the end of this one.
But yeah, we do have a lot of different social media outlets that we've created, and wherever we've posted this, we'll try to include the links to any of those. Twitter, possibly I think Instagram is what we started as well.
Yeah, we'll listen to
different locations that you can listen to the podcast, whatever's most convenient.
I'll listen to a sub-Saharan African band's entire discography, and we'll talk about it if that's what you want us to talk about.
I would appreciate that very, very much. But to move on to our next topic. Our main topic today is Fiona Apple. And if you want to know more about our thoughts on her latest album, you can specifically go back to our first episode, the one with Kid A versus Amnesiac. Towards the end of that show, we discussed her as part of our new music series. But once we finished that, we kind of discovered that we actually have a lot to talk about her overall. So that's why today's show is an in-depth look at Fiona Apple and her career.
Yes, and to recap about the last one, I had never listened to Fiona Apple until her last album came out, Fetch the Bolt Cutters. So I thought it would be interesting to delve into her entire discography, listen to all of her music, and see what we have to discuss, because David's been a longtime fan of hers. And, I've been listening to nothing but Fiona Apple for the past week, for hours and hours on end every day. So I should have something to talk about.
And I guess my personal history with her, I used to pick out a lot of music back when I was in high school from the local library. So that was before things like Spotify were around. The only way to listen to music was either buying the CDs yourself or going online and either using LimeWire or Frostwire. What is it called?
I only use LimeWire. Yeah. I don't know.
And I never used any of those. I got all my music surprisingly from the library, and the library has it actually was a pretty good discovery place. My first album that I listened to was Extraordinary Machine, and it wasn't until a decade later that I realized that the version that I got I don't know how I even ended up with this version from the library. It was the unreleased bootleg.
You got the Jon Brion version.
I got the Jon Brion version at the library.
It was never It was never released officially. How?
I don't know. My belief is that somebody rented out the CD from the librry and then switched the official CD with the unreleased version they were.
Did you get a CDR that was burned with the copy?
I mean, at this point, I don't know. It wasn't uncommon though for the library, the CDs at the library to either have a photocopied cover instead of the official pamphlet, because sometimes they will get stolen, or for them to have a secondary CD as opposed to the official CD. I guess that it must have been.
I guess at the time you had no idea it was a different version,
right?
That you didn't get the official version,
right? I mean, I got that CD somewhere around 2005, 2006, and I listened to that version for well over like around the decade really before I realized that they were in fact two versions. But maybe we'll get more into that
Yeah,
later
we'll
on.
get into why there are two versions of Extraordinary Machine in a little bit, but so do you want to just start with like a little bit about Fiona Apple?
Right, let's start a little bit about her. Fiona Apple, birth name Fiona Apple McAfee Maggart.
I see why she
She
shortened it.
Yeah, she definitely. But she was born in the late '70s in New York. Uh, I haven't read about her life in a while, but from what I remember, she grew up listening to a lot of the Beatles. Specifically, at one point, somebody pointed out like the White Album was one that was like really influential on her, and I think that would make sense because I think that one shines a little bit more in her music.
Yeah, good taste. It's the best Beatles album.
And I do agree with that. So there's no debating there. But we'll have a Beatles episode sometime in the future for sure. No spoilers on that. But yeah, what am I reading over here? So
So
she does come from like a slightly musical family. I mean, her one of her grandparents was a dancer, and then a vocalist for a big band, a big jazz band, and I was thinking cabaret, and then another one was an actor. So her family is definitely a little bit accustomed to the whole performance. Uh,
the whole jazz singer thing makes sense to me now because I mean we'll get into it, but well I don't know how much we'll talk about her first album, but that there's a lot of elements in her first album that sound like a little jazz singery to me. Like there's some songs in there.
yeah, and there's also a lot of her personal life is definitely rife with um, dark events. She's always struggled with eating disorders, anorexia in particular. She goes through a lot of depression, and over here it says self-loathing. I mean, it kind of ties in to depression, but like I know she's also been a victim of rape, which has been a subject in some of her songs, especially in her first album. As a young woman, she had to go through that. And panic attacks, kind of like, kind of shaping a little bit of like what her personal life is like. Because I mean, it is actually very important in her music. Her music is very personal in the way that it is written. But I will say that's probably as much of a background to give about her. Her professional life then started officially in the mid '90s, when she was discovered, and then she started writing stuff, and then that's a good point to get started on her debut.
So her debut album Tidal came out in 1996. So this album probably has, her biggest hit single, "Criminal." I don't really think anything else would come close, and she released that as her like biggest mainstream hit. And for me, this album as a whole, the first time I listened to this album was last week. So I'm, I'm okay with it. I don't love it. I think there's a few highlight songs on it for me, but as a whole, I don't think she's on this album super developed as a songwriter, like as much as she will be in her next few albums.
I do agree with that general sentiment. The album as a whole, I will still recommend it. It's definitely not a bad album, but it's not an album that I will start with unless you're the kind of person that is only used to maybe more mainstream music. If you're familiar with music at the time, she had a lot of comparisons to um, maybe specifically Tori Amos is one that has always been thrown her way. That her music sounds like Tori Amos, but she kind of fell into the same groove as other people who were really popular at the time. In the last episode, I mentioned people like Jewel or Alanis Morissette. It was a very strong female singer songwriter.
Yeah, and do you think because I don't that's female singer songwriters from the '90s, not a genre I really know about. So do you think that comparison is because their music sounds similar, or just because they're women singing?
I think a little bit of both, to be honest. Especially in her first album, there's a lot that kind of really does not stand out. To kind of maybe go a little bit more in depth of how I feel. We talked about Criminal. I think Criminal is definitely her best song in that album. But some other ones that like maybe pop up are like Sleep to Dream and Shadow Boxer. Those are songs that are a little bit more interesting in terms of there's more of a production element, and the drumming is a little bit more intense, and even just the song structure are a little bit more exciting
And
than.
a thing that I thought was kind of unique to Fetch the Bolt Cutters, but now that I listen to her entire discography, it's not really. Is like the drumming on the album has always kind of been like she's always kind of had like hard drums that are kind of front and center,
Right.
like which I
Maybe
thought was
maybe not always, but it's been generally a running theme, I would say.
like
Yeah.
not always like the leading thing, but it seems like she likes kind of drums that are like punchier, like kind of more up front than
Right.
like because some albums will have the drums like farther in the background where you can't like they're more subtle.
I
This is
do
kind of
agree.
like
Yeah. And especially, I mean, it's definitely one of her shining qualities. I mean, a lot of the songs that I don't think are as great are songs that do not use the this drumming. But yeah, so I mean, just like looking at this, like the set list, I think the album starts out pretty well. Besides those songs that I mentioned, maybe another standout is "Never Is a Promise," at least to me,
yeah.
and I think to her as well because she also released a live version later on. But it's a song that even though instrumentally it might not be like the most groundbreaking, I think she displays a lot of emotion in her vocal.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I like about Fiona Apple is like I think I tend to like more of her just like kind of stripped back stuff where it's kind of just her and minimal instrumentation singing because I think she's a great performer, just like singer. Like she can like her singing style, she's just so emotional and she just sings her ass off a lot of times, starts screaming and shit, and just like you can really feel the emotions she's trying to like give off. And I think she can do that best when it's just like her and a piano or her and minimal instrumentation, where it's kind of showcasing her emotions and her vocal abilities.
I think that's kind of an interesting take, and it's not one that I disagree with entirely. I think that compared to most other artists, she can do a lot with just her and her piano, and I think also like throughout the years she's gotten even better at that.
Yeah.
But I that's a point that I'll definitely have more to talk about later on. But
Yeah, because this first album doesn't really like you can see her vocal style in it, but I don't think she fully fleshed out her like singing style and her like really emotional style singing really until like probably the next album. Like this one's still a little more. She hasn't really found herself fully. I don't
there's a
think.
lot of like honestly kind of boring songs towards the end of the album. Um, there's a few songs that I've never really warmed up to as much. Like "Pale September," I think is one that at least for me personally, but I think other people would probably agree, is not really a standout. And so a big thing that this album gets crap for is that it is the kind of album that you would find at maybe like at a Starbucks shelf, like
Yeah,
when you're getting
definitely.
some coffee, and then you kind of pick it up. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not an
It's that kind of
album,
thing. I don't know, adult contemporary.
right?
Yeah.
But at least the seeds are there for what's to come. But she hasn't yet completely like fully found how to express herself with just her voice and her piano. And a lot of the better songs on here are songs that include either like the percussion elements to it or just better arrangements and production overall. But not all of them are hits. But that's Tidal, the 1996 album. Maybe it'll be good mostly for reference as we go through. Then we go to the next album, and it's really this is the funnest album to.
Are you gonna say the whole thing?
Yes, this next album is called. So kind of some background. A lot of people gave Fiona Apple crap because they thought that she was just like a corporate, just like kind of add on to what was going on at the time. But she really backlashed against all of that. There's a lot of anger in Fiona Apple. So like when she got an award at the VMAs, she I forget exactly what she did, but she flipped off the people. She was like, you know, I don't want this, basically. This is not what I'm about. And which is kind of weird because she's signed on to like a major record label, and so this will be a situation that'll come up later. But in 1999, she paired up with Jon Brion to produce "When the Pawn Hits the Conflicts." He thinks like a king. What he knows throws the blows. When he goes into the fight, and he'll win the whole thing. For he enters the ring. There's nobody to batter when your mind is your might. So when you go solo, you hold your hand and remember that death is the greatest of heights. And if you know where you stand, then you know where to land. And if you fall, it won't matter, 'cause you'll know that you're right.
Also known as When the Pawn.
Right. That's the second studio album from Fiona Apple. Came out just at the very end of the decade. And for a lot of people, this was a turning point because this album kind of like solidified her in which direction she was going to move in towards.
And she also formed a very important relationship with producer Jon Brion.
Yeah, exactly. But the whole point of that album, Tidal, is to kind of say like I'm gonna do this regardless of what people are throwing at me, and I'm gonna stand by my own. And that whole mentality, I think, has come across strongly through her career. She's the kind of person who like really just does what she wants. She doesn't like follow trends the same way
She
that other
releases
artists do.
basically an album every 10 years, and like it's always different from her last.
It's not a constant spread. Every between every album, there's always a slightly longer wait. So this is only a 3-year wait from her first album to her second. But over here, it's really when we start getting some pretty solid collection of songs. There's a few songs that I still think don't make the landing, like Love Ridden and I Know. Those are songs that
Okay, now we have a problem.
now we have something to talk about.
I Know is probably my favorite song on the album.
Okay. What is it about I Know that really like stands out to you?
It's just, I don't know. I think she's great at like ballads, like that kind of ballad where it's minimal. Her and a piano. There's some orchestration Jon Brion does in the background of that song, or swells to what's the word, emphasize her points and stuff. But just really the emotion that she brings to singing songs like that, and just the performance. Like, that's my favorite part of Fiona Apple, is her emotional singing. And when a song really emphasizes that, that's when it really hooks me.
I think that I think that her lyrics are still really good. And she does put up a good performance, vocally, etc. But that's all that these songs are relying on, and that's never been a winning strategy with me, at least. There needs to be something to carry me through. Unless the performance is out of this world, and is you feel like is something that needs to be highlighted, then I think that, at least me personally, I think that it needs to be complemented with something to it. And I think her ballads, I think, are the songs that I probably like the least, especially in the early years. I think she got a lot better at them later on for other reasons, but I think over here.
And I do want to make 2 disclaimers. One, I've only listened to this album for the last week, or these albums, other than Fetch the Bolt Cutters and The Idler Wheel, to a lesser extent, The Idler Wheel. This is the only week I've listened to these albums, so I won't have a lot to say about the lyrics because I haven't really dived into those. I kind of listen to the music.
I mean, I also haven't I haven't sat down with like the lyric sheets or anything.
And also, I want to say I do like this album. I think it's her first like great album, because a lot of songs on here are great.
I would also call it great.
Just Jon Brion, I don't know. It's a lot of times looks like the stuff he does is like too much. Like, to me, like, you can just have. This is why I'm gonna say, like, we'll probably get this more in when we talk about Extraordinary Machine next. But you can just have her singing with minimal instrumentation and it's amazing. You don't, and a lot of times I think when you add too much shit on top of it, it just detracts from the song.
I I definitely see what you mean to say there, but yeah, I mean I think maybe like a sticking point that we're gonna have is the importance and the I guess the value that Jon Brion adds to the songs itself. If you're somebody who is very Fiona Apple centric specific, then I can see why you would want the more stripped down songs. But I personally love what Jon Brion is doing on here. It really comes through in solidifying these songs, and I think in this album she is still. I feel like she's still building herself up in terms of like her songwriting and her and the way that she portrays those songs. Like a lot of people give her crap for like overwriting, if that's any phrase. I mean, the title of the album kind
Yeah.
of like speaks for itself.
She's one of those songwriters that will just write a lot of lyrics to her songs, and like Bob Dylan does the same thing or did the same thing in the '60s or whatever. I don't know what he's doing now, like
Well, I
murmuring
mean,
into
he
a
released
can.
a 20-minute song on JFK, so
Yeah, and
I don't think he stopped doing
yeah. Also, don't listen to that song; it's not worth it.
that. That was our new music hot take. It's,
But like,
I haven't listened to it myself.
what do you think of "Get Gone"? That song, because that's another song that's a little more stripped back.
Right. I mean, at this point, I don't remember exactly quite how it goes, but based on what I remember, it's a song that I like. I think it's solid enough. I think it's stripped back, but there's enough on top of it to
has a
help
little-
it carry along.
It has a little more orchestration than I know it does, but I don't know. This. I like things that are maybe I like more minimal things because in general, like when something has too much orchestration on it, too much extra instrumentation, stuff like that, I'm like, you're just doing too much. Like,
Right. I'm definitely more of a at times at least maximalist in that. I definitely do think that there's times when things can get a little bit overbearing in terms of how much it's overlaid on top of each other. But I think that when you can add more is better. Is like that just has to be a thing. For instance, if we go back, one of my least favorite producers that, but yet acknowledging how important he has been, is Rick Rubin. I do not like Rick Rubin's production style at all, and it's because he goes for that minimalist production style that you're talking about. The thing that I think is best about minimalist production is maybe that it allows an artist to have to fill that empty space for themselves.
well, if the artist is strong enough to fill it, like
Right,
if their
exactly.
artist, like their singing style or rapping or whatever they're doing vocally, is they have a strong enough presence to just fill that empty space, then they can do that. And Fiona Apple is somebody who can do that. So I'm like, I'm listening to these songs and I'm like, just put her in front. Just like, I don't need this orchestra. I don't need these orchestra swells. I don't need all this random shit. Just put her voice in front. She's that good of a singer.
I think she's a great singer and all of that, but like I think that at least at this point in her career, she it is to her detriment to just do it by herself.
Yeah. And also, like, career-wise, if she did do what I said, she probably would have just been, like, that kind of Starbucks album, Nora Jones type thing or something, like, just
Right.
adult contemporary singer. Like, it's great for her career that she went in this direction, I think. Getting with Jon Brion, becoming, like, an indie darling. That's great. That was
Right.
good for her.
And
I do like this album.
yeah, I mean it's a great album. I mean but I would say like for me the standouts are the songs like Limp, and Fast as You Can, the opener On the Bound. I think these are the strongest songs for me at least.
Limp, I don't remember fully, but I do remember not liking it.
Limp at least lyrically is a little bit of a harsh song because it's kind of saying that you it's kind of like that Pink song is like that it's just you and your hand tonight, basically. Is like you'll be lying limp in your own hands, is what she says. And
And Fast as You Can, I also like that song, but I like, in the middle of the song it kind of slows down, like, because in the beginning of the song, when the song starts, it's, kind of a more fast-paced
right,
song where it's going
right.
back, but then it kind of like breaks down in the middle and it's her singing.
Yeah,
Like, I love that part.
I
And
see.
like that's the highlight of the song to me. The other parts are good, but I don't love it. But when it gets to that part, that's like really the
When I
part
hear
that
that
hooks me.
slow part, for me is like I think it adds to the song, but it adds to the song in terms of being more dynamic.
Yeah.
To me, I still think that
If the song was
it's a
entirely that, it
song,
wouldn't be good, I don't think. But
right? And like, I mean, when I listen to the song, when I go into that song, I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be fast as she can. I mean, it's not super fast, but it has a lot of like energy behind
it's
it.
fast for a Fiona Apple
It's
song,
it's
I
like a
think.
galloping song.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say generally those three songs that I mentioned are some of her more like more energetic songs on the album. It's not energetic as an upbeat. It's energetic as in like there's these drums that really drive the song
Yeah.
forward. And
It's like what kind of genre like it's like just super fast drums, kind of like it sounds like the 90s to me. I don't know. Is
it's
there
not. Oh, I mean, I don't know if the '90s. It's not the same kind of drums because like maybe I don't know if in this album she does it, but like she eventually starts using things like drums like timpanis and like a lot of toms and not so much snares. At least not on this album. But yeah, she goes for like some deeper drums. It's I wouldn't say tribal, but like is drums that yeah that kind of they go deep into you.
Are you saying this album or later ones?
More so later on,
Yeah.
but even this far early, like in her second album, you can still feel that the drums that she
Yeah.
tends to use are more toms and the deeper sounds. Not so much like hi hats or
Yeah.
snares. Um, but she, yeah, I mean like it's also like you start seeing a lot more of like a manic energy coming out of her. Like there's yeah, there's a side of her that is not exactly she's not just going through life well. Like
Yeah.
there are things that bother her and like things that like she needs to say that are not always pretty. And I think that's when we first start seeing some of that side of her coming out. But yeah, that's this album. I think it's definitely a yeah, like we said, a great album. There's some songs that to me are a little bit less uh, like that maybe bring the album down for me. I think that they caused the album to maybe slow down too much at certain points. But I know that for
I
you
mean,
kind of feel like
I like her slower songs, and I don't know. I think the majority of these songs are great.
yeah, and she's also not like it's not anything that's like too gimmicky or like too similar to like other stuff coming out at the time. All right, should we just get straight on to Extraordinary Machine then? I think this is
Yeah.
going to be our main sticking point in today's show. So a little bit of a background over here. Fiona Apple, she has a habit of not making music regularly. She finished her second album in 1999, and then she was kind of thinking to herself, you know what? This whole music business has been fine and dandy, but if that's it, then that's it. She wasn't writing any new songs, and she didn't really feel the inspiration for it. She didn't have any new life experiences that really like led to any better new songwriting. But it was actually this album was the birth of it was caused by Jon Brion. Who did you read anything a little bit about?
I did actually read about why there are two versions of this album. So Fiona Apple wasn't she. I guess you could call it writer's block, but she just said like no new songs were coming to her, and she's just like, well, if no new songs come, then I'm not gonna write anything, and and she was fine with it. She kind of accepted the fact of like if that was her last album, then that's her last album. But then Jon Brion comes to her, and he at the time he was working on a movie, Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah,
He
that
was
one, yeah.
scoring that movie, and that's actually one of my favorite movies of all time. So you should watch it. It's great, and it
I
has a
haven't
good.
seen it yet.
It's I could do a whole podcast on that
Right,
movie. It's
right.
amazing. Go watch it. But he said, but it's a funny story because one of the actresses in that movie he was dating at the time, but when like they had broke up in the middle of the movie, So he was scoring the movie and having to watch footage of his ex-girlfriend
Yeah,
like
this is just
for
cruel.
hours on end. So he was just miserable the entire time. So he went to Fiona and he said like, "Can you please do a new album so I can do something else? Like
Right.
I need something to get my mind off this album, off this movie."
Right. And so Fiona, like, she agreed to it eventually, but, like, she had writer's block. So she started off these songs, but they weren't completed songs. They were songs that she completed as they went on. So, something that she later brought up was that she didn't have enough time to live with these songs before making them. She kind of just created the songs as she went.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have Jon Brion, who is like, he has all of this pent up emotions that he's trying to release artistically, and for him, this is the avenue that he uses to have his
Yeah.
artistic creation. So there's a first version of the Extraordinary Machine that was completed in 2003, and that one is very heavily dominated by the sounds created by Jon Brion and his vision for what the album would be. And then there's a little bit of an argument about what happened, but the album was shelved. Part of the story, and the story that I think maybe is more true, is that Fiona did not feel comfortable enough releasing the record, and she wanted to either re-record some parts or like redo some of the production. And that's why it was delayed so much. But other people think that they sent the album to Sony, and Sony didn't like the album. They thought that it was too, I don't know if experimental is the right word, or just too out there, too weird.
Yeah, and so I was reading a little bit about this, and from what I read, and I was just reading the Wikipedia article, it sounded like it was both of those things where Jon Brion and Fiona Apple were having problems finishing the song, both of them together. I guess maybe it's because this was a different way for Fiona to write a song, like write an album that like you said, like the songs didn't come to her. She kind of was like forced to write it, but she accepted, she agreed to do it. But she was like, kind of she wasn't inspired maybe.
Right.
So they were kind of having trouble writing the album and figuring things out. And also that the label didn't like what she made at the end. So I guess it ended up being shelved, and was it leaked after that?
Yeah, so the album was leaked at first kind of slowly. One song came out, another song came out. The second song actually even had like, still some notes attached to it on the file itself, of like the production notes.
Yeah, and this was 2003, so this was
Right.
like the early days of the internet being like mass, like a lot of people on the internet, and early days of albums being leaked and stuff.
Yeah, this is kind of like a big deal. Like a lot of people didn't really know exactly how to react. There was like some super fans like protested outside of Sony, trying to get them to release the album. I think from a listener's perspective, it was seen as like corporate, trying to have too much control over artistic creation. That's the way that a lot of the fans saw it. And so like within the indie community, that kind of like gave her a lot more visibility, in the sense that this was an artist that was creating her own stuff, but
And the man's bringing her down.
the man bringing her down. Yeah, so that's a lot of the reason that she gathered a lot of attention at the time within the indie community. But at the same time, we talked about it last episode. There's still a lot of people who, maybe even today, they still have the concept that she's that singer-songwriter from the 90s that received that VMA award.
Yeah.
But this is her kind of making that transition pretty much fully into the indie world. Was this whole process of her releasing this album. But yeah, basically eventually the entire original album, the one created by Jon Brion with Fiona Apple, came out. It got leaked entirely, and then shortly afterwards, Fiona finally released the finalized album. She had a guy called Mike Elizondo do the production, and he was mostly known for working with really more like hip hop and R&B artists.
I think he worked with Dr. Dre a lot. I think that was who he mostly worked with.
Right. I think that was one of the big names he was associated with. But that was what we did over here, was that we listened to both versions of the album. There are a few differences in just the songs itself. and some similarities. So we'll start with those. But basically, the first and last song on the album, "Extraordinary Machine" and "Waltz," they're both the same on both versions.
Yeah,
Those two songs.
those are Jon Brion, and I think for me, that's those two songs exemplify a Jon Brion Fiona Apple song, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Like that's the epitome of Jon Brion and Fiona Apple working together. Because "Extraordinary Machine," the title track, and the on the official release at least, it's the first track. It's like a musical, like it's like musical theater music.
Right. It's got like a weird, either like vaudeville style. Some people compare it to like kind of like a Tom Waits, kind of like this
It's like
dystopian.
if Tom Waits made a Disney movie,
Right.
fine.
Right.
But
It's like a dystopian music hall kind of song, and
dystopian.
it's maybe not dystopian, but it's just very.
It sounds like a Disney movie,
But it's not fully like a Disney movie. I will say it's
like an indie Disney movie. But I'm just missing it. I do actually think this is a highlight on the album. I actually like this song a lot because even though it's a lot of this kind of musical theater shit, it's not. It is kind of stripped back in its own way because it's not really a lot like big orchestra swells and stuff like that. It's kind of just like spare in its way. Like the arrangement is spare, and Fiona Apple actually takes advantage of this style of music and really gets into it vocally.
Yeah,
where she's kind of like
she goes really high pitched with that song.
Yeah, there's one point where she's super like the top of her range, just like hitting the highest notes she's possibly
right.
can.
It's like playing back in my head right now as you're talking about it.
It's like the song is kind of like a dance between her and the orchestration and the arrangement.
Right.
Like
I do agree.
And I think she does it. I think that song for me is the best Jon Brion Fiona Apple song together. Like it really shows the best parts of both of them and the best of them working together.
I think as a in a collaborative manner, I think so. I think that song exemplifies the best of what the two of them could achieve together. Yeah, and yeah. So I mean, I think that's why she decided to keep it. I would say, she did keep that one, the opener and the ending. The ending is kind of similar in the sense that it's not like her standard song is a waltz. It's kind of more. Mm-hmm. It's got like a style that they try to play to.
Yeah,
and
but that's another song that I love.
Right.
Like I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's great too, and I think it works because these two songs have a particular style or a particular structure that they're trying to work from, and so they kind of go into it already. Jon Brion is kind of making this style work in a way that's also very creative. A lot of the instrumentation on this album, especially I would say the Jon Brion version, is very dissimilar to what is going on at the time. It's just a lot more similar to something that like Sufjan Stevens might be coming out with. There's a lot of strings arrangements. Even the drumming over here, there's definitely timpanis going on in some of these songs.
So you're talking about the Jon Brion version or the released version?
So right now we're still talking about these two songs, but I mean just generally the Jon Brion compositions. Just they have these qualities to them.
In general, when you're talking about the two versions, the Jon Brion version sounds like something he would have done with On When the Pawn, like kind of an extension of that, maybe an evolution of that style.
I would say an evolution is like there's no the style is not exactly the same, but you can definitely see how the two albums are similar. They're just kind of there's a following through. A song like On the Bound, for instance, is a good predecessor for what would be putting out over
definitely.
Here. Whereas, let's say, another song that kind of sticks out in terms of like that maybe not sticks out, but the song that is kind of different in the two versions is Parting Gift, is a song that was not that was made after Jon Brion was released from production.
And let me guess, you hate it.
I don't hate it.
Because I love it.
I think it's a good song. Something that, like, at the end of the day, by this album for sure, Fiona Apple can rely more securely on her songwriting and on on her songwriting, I would say, because regardless of the production, her songs are still good, solid at this point. Like even if it was just her singing with a piano and nothing else, like they would still stand up because they're still interesting. You know, they're not too repetitive. They have interesting chord progressions and stuff that
Yeah.
like still makes the song an interesting thing. But saying that, I do think that Parting Gift is a little bit underproduced, in the sense that like there's
Well, I read on that song, apparently that was just like her first take. Like it's just her and the piano first take.
yeah, I mean, I totally believe it,
Yeah.
but I think that the song has a lot more potential that just wasn't fully tapped
Well, I
into.
think it's perfect the way it is.
But I think this is definitely the a great example of what Fiona Apple, and maybe like with the help of Mike Elizondo, um, what it kind of exemplifies like the approach that she took, because I think maybe something that was underlying is that she felt like the album had become too much Jon Brion, and she kind of felt like she wanted to make the album more of her own.
This is also speculation
It's
because
also speculation, yeah, but this is just based on like what I hear, but also maybe informed by a little bit of the comments that I've read online. The Something that I could definitely say right now is that the Jon Brion version, even though they're the exact same songs, they're still the same lyrics and it's still her singing. The Jon Brion version is kind of like is a bookend for the progression of her early part of her career,
yeah,
and
to the style of her early career. That's
right,
like that John Bryan sound, which was, I don't know, highly arranged and, I don't know, kind of quirky at parts and like things like
right.
that. That ended.
That ended at that point, and even though she kept some of it for her released version, a lot of the reproduced songs, they they don't quite perfect, but they kind of start her on her way on her what we can see maybe as like a second phase of her career, where
Yeah.
she's depending almost entirely on her own to carry the songs, as opposed to the producer to make the song special.
What are your favorite songs on this album? Like, what do you think are highlights on it?
I think my favorite song on this album is "Not About Love," and I think that
But which
song,
version though?
the Jon Brion version.
Because I like the released version better.
I disagree very heavily. I something that I do think that the song itself, like I like the percussion on the release version. On
And
the
like, there's a part where she says like it's not about love, and then it stops. And like, there's like on the release version, there's like guitar hits on it and stuff. I think it's harder and
the
more.
thing is like I don't like those guitars. I think the guitars
That's what
don't
makes
come
it
across
for me.
well.
That's like,
No, I think like if they were gonna, I mean, I think they could have been better if they used a different tone of guitar. But I don't like the sound of that guitar. It just to me it doesn't. I don't know, it just doesn't do it justice. And I do think that the unreleased version, the Jon Brion version, could have used a little bit more of that percussion
yeah, it
element
didn't
to
hit.
it.
I think
But
this song and really a lot of songs on the John Bryan version just don't hit as hard as like the songs on the release version do. And that might
I
be
disagree.
that
But
might
like,
well, okay.
yeah.
I mean,
But
that
like,
to me that might be because the album, the unreleased one, was technically not finished. So maybe they would have made it hit harder in like, I don't know, in finishing it up. It might just be finishing touches that parts
right,
needs.
possibly.
But like for an example, a song that I really like on the album is Red Red Red, and I hate the John Bryan version
Oh,
of it.
that's also the same like the opposite thing with me. I listened to the release version of Red Red Red, and I like literally my reaction is blah. There's nothing to it. The production itself, it is to me it is basically trash. Like
You're
it's just like this very soft chords is playing in the background, and I
and letting Fiona carry the song.
Yeah, but
It gives you.
the song is just too empty, and like I think the song, you know the
I think
even
because
though she's singing, even though her singing is still fine and all that stuff, but like the song structure itself, uh, I don't think carries by itself. I and like to me, like it doesn't go anywhere. Whereas the John Bryan version, it is basically like a wild trip.
it's
It's
like I don't like the mood on the Jon Brion version. It's like too dark. Where I don't think the song. Maybe it's because you heard the Jon Brion version first, and I heard this other version first, the
I
release
mean, it
version.
is. I mean, that is also something to put out there. That like, yeah,
And it's
uh,
like I don't know, like the instrumental because they also put a lot of effects on her vocals on the Jon Brion
they
version.
do.
And
They
it's
do
like,
put a lot of
and
effects.
I feel like the instrumental kind of swallows her, and I
It's.
don't
I
think
mean, this song on the John Bryan version is definitely one of the heavier produced songs, but it's
I
put
think it's
in there
also the most
to
different. I think this song is probably one of the more changed ones.
yeah between the two versions. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. There's a few other examples as well, but I mean, Red Red Red, the John Bryan version. The song itself, I think it fits it better because it's she said that the inspiration for the song was she was reading some books on optical illusions and he kind of turned it into yeah kind of like walking through like a hall of mirrors and
Yeah.
like it's just I mean a lot of the John Bryan produced versions have kind of like a circus or like a carnival kind of effect
Yeah.
to the production
And I don't like that kind of stuff in general.
in
Like
general.
like songs that have that kind of like I don't know. There's some I can't think of an example, but like there's songs that have like a kind of like circus carnival quality sounds to them,
Yeah.
and that's always turned me off.
Well, like even for the benefit of Mr. Kite, is
That's
that
the one really accept. Even though like I don't love that song, but like the Beatles for a time in my mind could do no wrong. So like that song I always kind of gave a pass, but like if I listen back to it, I'm like it's fine, I guess, but like I don't love it.
No, I am a fan of the carnival style music, and I was thinking about this earlier. I think that like listening to the John Bryan version of the song was something that informed my opinion on that because I thought that this album was great with this whole style kind of laid upon it. It is a little bit like it is on the whimsical end, but because she is not a whimsical person, it tends to balance out very well. She adds a lot of like dark elements to the songs. It's not a funny album. It's an album that like if anything, um, I think at the end of the day, I think a lot of these songs are written from like it reminds me of like the musical Chicago. Have you ever seen that? It's I mean that one's the one where like there's these women in the jail talking about how they got into jail and like a lot of them is because they killed their man and like he had it coming and it's kind of like a weird like she lost her mind because of all these troubles that she was going through and so there's a little bit of like vindictiveness that comes across but also a little bit of like you know like maybe you should be in like an institution instead
Yeah.
because of like and like I think the John Bryan version is a lot better at bringing out the more like um like brain the more brain damage maybe like I don't know like like the that more like it kind of lose it in your head kind of aspect to it whereas like once you strip it back um it becomes a lot more of that vindictive aspect and I don't notice this the most with the song like Get Him Back which is the second song on the album. And actually, I thought that it was really good with the release version as well. So even though with that one, I will say both versions are really good, even though they're both very
Yeah.
different.
And Get Him Back is, I mean, that's not a song I love on the album, either version, but it's fine. I don't hate it. But I mean, ultimately, I think the best thing that happened to Fiona Apple is getting rid of Jon Brion, because I think her best work is her two albums after this one.
I I think that moving forward, it was necessary for her to get rid of John Bryan because she saw that she had all of this artistry inside of her, and
And
she
you brought
wanted to
up
showcase it fully.
And you
right?
brought
Like,
up a good point because you said like Jon Brion brings this whimsical production and she's not a whimsical person. Like so it kind of clashes but in a
no,
good way.
but
For you,
it's a good, yeah, for
for
me,
you it's
yeah.
like it clashes in a good way, but like I wonder but like I think what she did later is like on the next two albums is yeah, strip away that whimsy and it's like that's not who I am. This is who I am. And I think those two albums fully encapsulate the type of artist Fiona Apple always was.
I don't know if always was, but I think it's if she. I think she discovered who she was with that process, and I mean the way I would see it is maybe like when she was with Jon Brion, they worked together as a duo, kind of like the same way that like I don't know. You listen to anytime you get like for instance somebody like Dr. Dre producing your album, you're gonna have a lot of Dr. Dre in your album, or like even
Yeah.
if you look at it like a band, there's always like a lot of the best bands have like these two people who try to balance out each other.
Like Lennon McCartney.
Lennon McCartney, or like if you listen to the Clash, Joe Strummer, Paul, and his name is Paul Simonon, or am I thinking of the bassist here?
That's the bassist. Was it Mick Jones? That's the guitarist. Yeah.
Mick Jones, yeah. And these are just two examples, but like throughout, you'll be able to pick out a lot of different artists that one of them tries to counteract the strengths of
And
the
it's
other.
funny, a lot of times they'll go solo and then
Yeah.
it just turns to shit. like both,
I mean, that
like
does
both of their
happen.
solo careers.
Right, but I think her getting rid of Jon Brion was like her way of quote unquote going solo.
Yeah.
And I think that it was better for her career, but I think that on this particular album, it's not always better. And I think we already talked about the two songs that I think are markedly detrimented because of that. And for me, it's Red, 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 and Not About Love. And I mean, I didn't mention it, but
And I like
the strings. I mean, like the strings that Jon Brion brought. To me,
yeah, get rid of them.
take
Fuck
to
those
me
strings.
they
They're
like
terrible.
accentuated the emotion of the songs, and I mean I think she learned to like make up for that. I think maybe before she was relying on the strings to like bring out the emotion.
Maybe because I think that's what it is. Like in a maybe a different type of artist that would rely on like strings and arrangement to like bring out those emotions that they're singing about because maybe they don't rely on their vocals enough. But Fiona Apple doesn't need any of that. She's such a strong performer that she doesn't need any of those
I think
arrangements.
I think at the time she could have still benefited, but she's at this point she's moving into a point where like she doesn't need it any further. But I mean, even vocals, it's not even very consistent. There's sometimes when the vocals are better, like for instance, in "Old Sailor," I think her vocals were better in the redone
That's
version.
a song I kind of just hate. I don't like that song at all. I really don't like either
I
version.
really
I
like
don't
that
like
song.
it.
I really like that song, and I mean, I do have some points about it. Um, but in "Old Sailor," for instance, she has a better vocal delivery the second time around, and she also adds some backing vocals towards the end of the song instead of using strings. So you see her like moving away from
Yeah,
string arrangements and more towards like overlaying vocals.
which will do very interesting stuff within her next two
right,
albums.
right. But I think that's definitely one of the
Yeah, the Jon Brion version just has a bunch of strings at the end, right? Yeah.
yeah. And then a song like Better Version, I think Better Version is also a great song. It came out really good on both versions.
They're pretty
but
similar on both versions.
They're not like super. I mean, like they are a little bit different. The unreleased version has a lot more of like that heavy drums, while the released version sounds a little bit fresher. And has some horns to it. There's a few songs in the middle of the album that like did away with some of like the weirdness. And like Temps, for instance, in the unreleased version is very carnival heavy,
Yeah.
and the released version sounds a lot more like I don't know, maybe more accessible, but in a way that's still done well. And I think at the end of the day, for me, like the released version of Extraordinary Machine, it doesn't stand out quite as much, even though it's still very strong quality. It doesn't stand out quite as much as like the unreleased version. The unreleased version is very unique. It's very out there. It's like it's different, and
It's not that different. It's When the Pawn. That's what it is.
It's not exactly like When the Pawn. When the Pawn.
Except for except for the song Extraordinary Machine and the song Waltz, which I think was kind of more of an evolution. The rest of the songs were just extraordinary. It were just like When the Pawn type songs. Like they would have fit
I
well.
disagree. I disagree. I think they just tried a lot of different stuff, and um they tried. I think it was like a more extreme version of When the Pawn, maybe.
Maybe.
But I mean, this whole aspects of like circuses and carnival kind of like inspirations, those things I think were very different. And even some of his string arrangements, now that we mentioned that he worked on a movie, they sound a little bit more cinematic.
Another thing I don't like.
I think sometimes it works well, and you know, I do think the newer version. I mean, these are not things that she would go on to explore, but I think when they called in the new producer, there were a few songs that maybe she was a little bit, I think rightfully so, maybe a little bit underwhelmed by, like Window, Oh Well, and Please Please Please. I think they did benefit from.
Oh Well is one of my favorite songs on the album.
To me it's like one of the songs that hasn't. It's never been like my favorite. But these three songs, I think, the Jon Brion version, for some reason, I mean, I think it actually was a little bit more stripped back in this Jon Brion version, but it sounded just too drawn out, and I think the new production did more to like maybe break it up. Well, Please Please Please, for instance, I really like the siren sounds that like kind of come in, and the production is a little bit more fuller just on these three songs, Window, Oh Well, and Please Please Please. And even Window has like an outro that wasn't there originally. I don't know. At this point, I think that like maybe the Jon Brion versions just became a little bit too overwhelming for her, in that like just too much of this aspect, and over here the new production just makes it sound less tired. But it's just not a production that you take to the bank. It's a production that like, you know, that makes a song that makes a song like, I don't know, good, but it's not like taking any risks, if that makes any sense.
I don't know. I think my final thoughts on this album is just that it's a very like transitional album. It's kind of hinting at the stuff that she's going, or at least it's hinting at the type of songwriting she's going to be doing in the future, kind of. But I kind of think her career path is kind of a little bit like Tom Waits in a sense, where
A
like
little bit, yeah.
his early career was very like, he was just doing that like, I guess, piano man type,
like bar
like
music.
that bar piano man music, and then he slowly is making it kind of stranger and weirder, and until he gets a swordfish trombone where he just goes insane.
Right. I mean, he goes even crazier too with like mule variations.
Yeah,
and,
even like I mean,
you know,
I'd love to do a Tom Waits episode. I love Tom Waits.
right. But you know, I guess we can move on over here. You know, we kind of both said what we wanted to say about Extraordinary Machine.
And now on to her best albums.
I mean, I guess maybe I shouldn't laugh, because I think these are really great albums. And definitely in terms of like herself as a musician, I think she has grown more and more with each release. The Idler Wheel is wiser than the driver of the screw, and whipping cords will serve you more than ropes will ever do. Is kind of like a harkening back to that When the Pawn title. But,
Yeah.
She has more restraint.
More stripped back. There
Yeah,
you go.
Yeah. And well,
she's mature now.
She's matured in that she has more restraint. She doesn't like just lead herself fully into, you know, things that might be detrimental to her music.
Like paragraph long titles.
Yeah. And I mean, it's still a long title, but you know, like that's who she is. And these songs over here, I think her songwriting is so much better. These are songs that, I mean, you listen to the album, and for the most part, it's really just her, a piano, and percussion.
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, the percussion is super interesting in this album.
Yeah, that's where whereas Jon Brion he made the interesting part like his arrangements, like his whimsical stuff, and like string arrangements and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whereas this one tried to make it more interesting with like different types of percussion, and really just more interesting songwriting.
Yeah. I think she did a really good job at looking at her own music, and because I think she at the end of the day she got rid of Jon Brion because she wanted a more stripped back sound and realized she couldn't have that with him. And but she also realized that like a lot of her more stripped back songs at that point um, just were lacking in something to like keep the song going. And I think this is a great move on her part to go head on using all of this percussion and different drumming styles. But also, we talked about before having different overlays of different vocals. I mean, the song "Hot Knife" I think is the best example of
Yeah.
her just going crazy with vocals as the main musical piece instrument.
And it's kind of a writing style that she'll do more in Fetch the Bolt Cutters, where it's kind of like instead of like her kind of like diatribe type songwriting where it's just on and on, more verses and verses. Hot Knife is kind of just like a refrain, like kind of just like one thing over and over, like I'm a hot knife and you're a pat of butter. Like, yeah.
And like yeah, it's a very simple song lyrically wise, but it has like a mantra feel to it.
Yeah, like a mantra. Like, and those aren't really my favorite songs of hers when she does them, but I think they are interesting. I don't.
I love those songs personally. I maybe this it's just a style of music that I enjoy more, but even though maybe she's saying less, the message comes across
Yeah.
more succinctly. And I don't know. There's also just fun songs at the end of the day. Like for somebody who isn't necessarily a whimsical person on her own, this comes there. She still has a lot of energy that like she gets along really well with whimsical people. I think there's something that attracts her to it, even though it's not her herself. And I think this is her way of kind of like displaying that that she is playful in some manner.
She's playful in a different way.
Right.
Like
And
there was like
yeah.
I wasn't am I wrong? And there was like a kind of like a scene, like a part of the indie scene in like the mid 2000s or whatever, or the 2000s in general, where it's like what is it, like twee or something, like whimsical music or whatever, like Zoe Deschanel sounding music. Is that, if that makes sense?
There's I would say there probably kind of is. I would have to give you like some go back and try to look for some specific examples. But yeah, I would say that there is a little bit of that sense to it. The 2000s indie scene was very playful overall.
Yeah, and I think she was kind of like Jon Brion was kind of pushing her a little bit in that direction,
Right. I
where
think
she is
John.
not at all that type.
Right. Well, I don't know if not at all, but I think he pushed her a little bit too much further than she had maybe willing to go. Um, I mean, not that I don't think she hated it. I just don't think she felt
Yeah,
like she
this
was
is all
being true to
speculation.
herself.
She might love all that shit, and she just wanted to like do something else. I don't know.
But these songs are all great, but they all stand on their own. Like they're good. They're just it's just great songwriting and like the structure of the song itself. There's less. It's the structure of the songs are less boring at the end of the day.
Yeah,
And so that's why she's able to get away with not having a more a more fuller production. She's able to be a little bit more sparse, and also her vocal, her while in Extraordinary Machine, sometimes her vocals are better in the unreleased version than the released version, or vice versa, and sometimes they leave slightly a little bit more to be desired. Over here, I think her vocals are just amazing throughout.
yeah,
I think she hits it every single time in terms of like she can't she her voice is enough to have that
yeah,
emotion come out. And yeah, she's just more consistent in terms of her vocal delivery and her songwriting. And I think that's why, and the percussion. I think that's at the end of the day what makes this album be what it is. I mean, I'm reading over here what like the instruments that were used, and like yeah, I mean it's mostly. I mean, besides the piano, it's really mostly just percussion.
yeah.
And
And like if you're looking at the stuff, it says She did truck stomping. She's a dance partner. She played her thighs on Daredevil. Like, it's kind of like, I think that's a technique that she'd do even more on Fetch the Bolt Cutters, where she's kind of just playing anything around her. Where, like, percussion wise, she's kind of just banging on the stuff around her. But yeah,
And
like,
even the instruments that she uses that are not strictly percussive, or have a percussive sense to them, like
well,
the marimba,
yeah,
or like the way she plays the piano tends to be.
she
Doesn't use a sustain pedal that much. And she's
a very percussive player where she's just kind of banging on it really hard.
yeah. I mean, I think that album, I think, was for her kind of like a crowning achievement in terms of like what she wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then we mentioned before that we already talked about her new album last time, but just like in terms of like her progression, it's interesting because Fetch the Bolt Cutters has a lot of the same stuff that makes Idler Wheel great,
Yeah,
but she has brought in not only a fuller production style, on top of like what already made her last album great, but she's also trying out a lot of new stuff. Like she's not afraid to like process her voice.
Would you say this is fuller? Because when I hear this versus Idler Wheel, I feel like it's raw, like a more raw production style, where at least the sound wise, like even on some songs bordering on like kind of sounding lo-fi in parts.
I think maybe like there's some aspects of that, and maybe in like the way that I can see what you mean by that, but there's what I meant to say is that there is not just her singing, percussion, and piano. There's a lot more stuff going on over here.
There's more arrangements.
Right. So maybe it's more fully arranged. But production wise, it's still there is kind of like a rawer sense in terms of like, maybe a lot of these songs were the first take as opposed to like going back and forth. But by this point, these are not songs that you find. I mean, maybe you still find them playing at a Starbucks, but like it's not like that stereotypical CD you pick up.
Maybe some of the songs, most of these songs would not be in a Starbucks.
Right, and she's definitely, I feel like, transitioned to a whole new thing. And yeah, I mean, I do want to give this album maybe a couple more listens to like really say whether like where it stands compared to the other ones, but it's really really solid all throughout.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe because I'm kind of like on the opposite, where this is probably the album I've listened to the most out of her stuff. Because this is like the one that I listened to organically. It's just the one that I wanted to listen to. So I don't know. I love it, and it might be, I don't know, this or Idler Wheel is my favorite one. But let's see if we can do that real quick. Rate everyone. Like, from what's the best to the worst?
Best to the worst. I don't know. I'm really gonna like kind of like. I'm gonna give you a non-answer in a sense. Vegetable Cutters, I think. Vegetable Cutters, Idler Wheel, and the Jon Brion version of Extraordinary Machine, I think all kind of stand on equal footing to me. And some days maybe I'll like one more than the other, because all three are pretty different albums when you compare, especially the Jon Brion Extraordinary Machine. But the released version of Extraordinary Machine, I think, would come kind of like a little bit below, and on similar footing to the When the Pawn, her second album. And then maybe not very far below, but like significantly lower is her initial release Tidal. Which, I mean, to this day, like it's very rare that I'll listen to it in full. I usually only go back to listen to like the few songs that I think are
It's weird. I thought you would like When the Pawn more.
Than what?
Than like Fetch the Bolt Cutters and Idler Wheel.
No. Like my opinion is still that she is a great artist and she's developed into being better and better with each release. It's just that she did not start out as great, and I feel like she needed to have a stronger producer to start off with. And
How do we like start off disagreeing? Like it's we just like disagree and then end up just agreeing. Like I don't, like how do we? The way that we agree sounds like
No,
we
I
disagree
mean-
with each other.
right. I think, but I think that like I think the biggest thing is that I think the biggest disagreement is at what point did she herself become better than her producers? And for me, it wasn't until Idler Wheel that like
Yeah.
it made sense for her to like take such a strong control over her output. I think in Extraordinary Machine, she let go of something that was great, like that Jon Brion unreleased version is an artistic statement of both her side and on both her part and his part. And by doing away with that, I think she got rid of like something that was, as a whole, better than what she ultimately released. But that's
I mean,
my take on that.
yeah, I think Extraordinary Sheen is like one of her weaker albums. Both versions of it. I just think the songs on it aren't as good as some of hers.
Where would you place it then? How would you? Like,
It's honestly like right. So okay, I guess number one. I don't know. Idler Wheel and Fetch the Bolt Cutters are very close. If I'd have to say I like one better, probably Fetch the Bolt Cutters because I've listened to it more. So I'll put that number one at a very, very, very close second, Idler Wheel. Then probably When the Pawn, and then Extraordinary Machine, and then Tidal.
okay. I mean, I see where how you're putting it there. No, I mean I think it's a disagreement on that part. I think this is like probably I think When the Pawn is it's just like it's
There's better songs on it.
No,
the songs are just
no.
better on it. They
no.
really are.
I mean like maybe some of the songs are better. Okay, maybe the songs themselves might be better because she did have more of herself going into the songs.
Yeah.
But I just think that Jon Brion did something amazing on Extraordinary Machine, and
Yeah, he did When the Pawn again, but he did it worse.
no, he didn't do it again. I think I think the Jon Brion version was something that
I
was,
think
like
we were
great.
saying on when we talked about Amnesiac and Kid A, I think Extraordinary Machine is a lot like Amnesiac, where there are some really great songs on it for me, but then a lot of the rest of it is just like kind of filler to me, where like quality wise, where it's like it's not that great.
I think Extraordinary Machine. I think the best version of Extraordinary Machine would be a little bit of a mixture of both. I think if she had been able to work with Jon Brion and maybe push for her ideas a little bit more,
Yeah.
then I think the album could have been stronger overall.
Or worked on him on, or like do like he did. She has his Jon Brion sessions, and then take some songs from there, and take some songs from the whatever his other name was.
Right.
Sessions.
Right, that also could work. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, there were some songs that I thought were better, like I mentioned, on the newer version. Some songs that I thought were kind of like an equal footing on both versions. But certainly some songs some of my favorite songs in the Jon Brion version, I thought were butchered on the actually released
Actually made a lot better though, like Red.
version. Right. So that's kind of like that's as much of a disagreement as you'll get from the two of us today on this matter.
Imagine when we actually disagree, like when we have totally different opinions.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out which when that happens. That'll be a rile up show. But all right, so now we'll wrap this up. We'll go to the new music section, I guess.
Yeah, on to new music. Okay, guys, welcome to the new music segment. Today, we're going to talk about 6 songs that came out in the past couple of weeks. We want to try to keep it usually to like songs that came out in the past week, but we wanted to talk about ones that are slightly older. But it's all been around the same month, like this last month, so pretty new. So the first song we're going to talk about is from Freddie Gibbs. Freddie Gibbs just made a new album with Alchemist, one of the best producers out right now, I think, at least most consistent. The album is called Alfredo. The song we're going to talk about is called Something to Rap About, featuring Tyler, the Creator. So, Debbie, what do you think?
I thought it was a pretty good track. I do like the production. It's very laid back, very smooth, very cool. And Freddie Gibbs definitely seems to encapsulate kind of atmosphere. And I will say, that song is it's shared very equally between Freddie and Tyler, the Creator.
The song doesn't have like a chorus or anything. It's kind of like half the song is just Freddie's verse, and then the other half is Tyler's verse.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of Freddie songs are like that. A lot of Freddie Gibbs songs are just him rapping. But yeah, I liked it. I liked it, and I would say if I had to make an opinion on it, maybe I like Tyler's feature a lot.
Yeah.
I think he's definitely come a long way.
Yeah, he's matured a lot from, like, the 18-year-old angsty teen kind of shit.
Yeah, and actually next week we're going to be talking more in depth about Tyler, the Creator.
We're going to be talking more about his entire career and his progression, the same way that we talked about Fiona Apple. So, if you like Tyler, the Creator, get ready for that. I also like this song a lot. I mean, I listened to this whole album. I really liked it. Freddie Gibbs is on, like, a run. He's... basically since Pinata, and I think that was 2014 that was released with Madlib, he's been just getting better and better. He's better at picking beats, picking who he's going to work with. Alchemist is the perfect person to work with for him and Madlib as well. But, so before this, Freddie Gibbs also made an album called Fetty, which was also with Alchemist produced every song. But that was with another rapper, Currency. So now this album is just Freddie Gibbs and Alchemist, and I love it. I love the song, something to rap about. I think it's great, laid back kind of vibes. Tyler, the Creator, did great. And Freddie Gibbs and Tyler, the Creator isn't really a matchup that you would expect. I wouldn't expect them to work together, but it actually worked out really well. Okay, so the next song we're going to be talking about is Yankee and the Brave by Run the Jewels. Run the Jewels just released their new album, Run the Jewels 4. Highly anticipated. Run the Jewels is comprised of Killer Mike and LP. They came out, 2012 I think they started?
They first had that collaboration, I think in 2012. It was a Killer Mike album, rap music, where the LP did the production, and then they had just every single year after that they had a new release, including, as many people forget, Meow the Jewels, my favorite release of theirs.
Yeah, possibly the best release that they have, Meow the Jewels.
Yeah, but they kind of stopped that run after Run the Jewels 3. It's been actually about 4 years since that one came out. So yeah, that kind of took a break in there, but even though they're taking a break, this song is still as hard hitting as their older stuff. You kind of, if you're familiar with their music, this is kind of like what you expect.
This is really like classic Run the Jewels vibe. Really like hard hitting, hardcore rap, driving, like really pump up music. It's kind of what they're known for doing.
Yeah, it's definitely not music that you're gonna dance to. It's music you're gonna, I don't know. Maybe, like, start a riot, too.
Yeah, like, I wouldn't say it's, like, the best of their stuff. It's kind of like, standard Run the Jewels, But after 4 years of no Run the Jewels, I'd like some standard Run the Jewels. Like, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, I can see what you mean by that. Yeah.
Do you have anything else to say about it?
No, I'm just glad that these two guys are still going at it, still on top of their game.
Cool. Next song.
Alright, this next song that we're going to talk about is from Brockhampton, the best boy band in the game right now.
Yep.
And Brockhampton, at this point I think most people might know about them. They're really just a bunch of guys who met on the internet and then decided to join up and...
Yeah, I think it was 2017 they started releasing their Saturation album, Saturations 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah,
all released in the same year. Really ambitious undertaking. And all of it, I mean, I liked all three of those albums. I thought all of them were quality music and really,
they were all pretty good. I don't know how crazy I was about some of the production and, like, some of the... especially in the first album. But they've definitely changed it up as they've gone through.
Yeah, and I think they do a good job of, like, mixing more, like, standard hip-hop stuff and, like, even some, like, hardcore hip-hop stuff and things like that with, like, that boy band music and, like, pop music and They do a good job mixing those two genres together.
Right. They have so many members that they all bring kind of like a different quality.
Yeah.
But over here, we're talking about their new single, Chain On / Hold Me, featuring none other than JPEG Mafia.
Yes, my favorite new artist out right now. But this new song is part of this thing they've been doing for, I think, for the past month now, where I think it's every weekend they've been releasing new songs under, like, technical difficulty radio. That's, I guess it's like the technical difficulties thing. So they've released maybe up to 10 songs, I think, at this point. I don't know. They've released a bunch. But we're specifically just going to talk about this one featuring JPEG Mafia.
Yeah. And I guess to get some of my thoughts out, it's basically 2 songs, although they're tied together. I don't know if lyrically maybe they're connected. And I like the chain on part of it a lot. I think the beat on it is really dope. And I
love that beat. That sample.
Yeah, that sample.
That beat is really good. And this is really something that I've been seeing on these new singles, because I don't think you've listened to any of the other ones.
No, I haven't. No.
A lot of these songs, I'd say even most of the songs are like sample based, like kind of like old school, like 90s type rap songs where it's all like sample based songs. And it's kind of it kind of gives you like an old school feel, which is a sound that they haven't really done a lot, if at all. Like no songs that they've really jumped to mind where it's like kind of that old school sample based shit. But they've been doing that a lot recently, so maybe their new album, if they're releasing a new album, I haven't heard anything about that, but maybe that's like the sound that they're going for in their new album.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't kept up with like what their release schedule is. Something I didn't like about the song. I mean, I did like the second half too, but the first half definitely impressed me. I kind of as the transition between the two, they have a sample of the Wu-Tang Clan, and kind of shows everything around me. I don't know. I don't really, at least for personal preference, I don't like when people sample such well-known.
It's
breaks or.
I mean, it's
portions.
not like they made it like a core part of the song.
No, they didn't.
It's like kind of like it's a transition into the second part, and the second part was pretty like kind of underwhelming to me. Like the first part was really like kind of more upbeat, kind of like it's just JPEG Mafia rapping, and his flow is great and all that stuff. He's rapping good, and then it like does that transition, and then it goes into like a slower, kind of sad undertone, kind of chiller part with the hold me part.
Yeah.
And it kind of just kills the momentum that the song had, and it's not. I don't know. I didn't really like that part of it.
Yeah, I thought maybe they could have I guess built on that first part more. Because it is the shorter part of the song.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. You have other thoughts about it?
No, I mean but in general, the technical difficulties stuff that they've been doing, I have liked it in general. I like that new sound that they're going for, and I want to see what they do with it, if that's even the sound that they go for in their new album. Okay, so next song we're going to be talking about is by the group Arm & Hammer, which is comprised of rapper Billy Woods and Elucid. They just released a new album, I think it was today. It's called Shrines. We're going to be talking about the first song on the album called Bitter Cassava, featuring another rapper, Pink Sifu. So, there's kind of like a growing underground scene of rappers, which, including Billy Woods and Elucid, also Pink Seafood, was like just very underground, like kind of New York, based in New York. And it's really like gritty, grimy. A lot of times the beats are like weird and experimental. And even like in some aspects avant-garde. So this Arm & Hammer new album came out. So this song we talk about, Bitter Cassava, it's really different than the other Arm & Hammer releases. The beat at least is like more kind of strange than what they usually rap on. And like a lot more stripped back, because it's really just like one small loop, kind of just looped over and over. It's kind of minimal. And I'm not crazy about the song. With Billy Woods and with Arm & Hammer in general, you really got to pay attention to the lyrics a lot, because they really like they go deep into what they're talking about, and a lot of times you have to have multiple listens to really get what they're talking about. So, we just had like one listen. So we can't really delve too deep into the lyrics, but just like the sound of the song, I wasn't super crazy about. It kind of reminded me of these other underground rappers like Mike and Mavi and Medhane. I don't know if you know of any of those.
Nope.
But it's like this super underground scene, like mostly based in New York right now. They kind of have a similar sound to that. And I really like that scene. And Earl Sweatshirt's last album, Some Rap Songs, is really indebted to that sound that those other rappers have been pushing. So it kind of sounds like that to me. What do you think of this song?
I definitely thought that the beat was different, and I was kind of like, I mean, I've never listened to this group before, so I don't know what their sound was like before this release. But I listened to the beat, and it's definitely not what you typically get from a hip hop song. Kind of makes me wonder, like, how do you get the flow to rap over that? Like, where do they find the flow from?
Yeah, that's like, you have to be like a really skilled rapper in order to rap over, like, convincingly rap over beats like this, because they're really minimal, and like there's not like a real groove to find to like really rap on easily and stuff. You have to like really find it and like find your flow, and like I commend them for rapping over it.
Yeah, even the way that it's looped, it's it's not a smooth loop.
Yeah.
I don't know. But they do. Only line that I really caught is that he's comparing himself to the RZA.
Yeah.
He did all this, and then now, like, I mean, I don't know what happened to the RZA, but like, I guess he's not getting what he ought to get. I don't know. But
yeah, like it takes a while, really. Like Billy Woods released an album I think last year called Hiding Places, which was one of my favorite albums from last year, and it's really great. If you want to start listening to Billy Woods, I'd really recommend that album to start with. But like he gets really deep and in depth into a lot of like social issues and like just his life or like life around that he's like perceived and stuff that he's seen, things like that. There's also, I've seen a lot of literary references in a lot of his songs too. It's really interesting, so I would recommend you listening to it. And this, like, I don't hate this song. I mean, I'm going to listen to the full album, and it's an interesting sound. I just want to see how they take the sound and what they do with it.
Alright, this next song that we're going to talk about is by Black Midi. Black Midi has been, it's a pretty recent band. They don't have that many releases.
Yeah, they kind of broke with their last album. I think it was their first album ever, called Schlagenheim. I think that's how you say it.
Yeah, Schlagenheim.
What year was it released?
Last year.
Yeah, last year, 2019. So yeah, they kind of broke out on the scene with that album. It was really critically acclaimed. Lots of people liked it. It's pretty popular. I like Black Midi. I'm not crazy about them, but I like their stuff in general.
Yeah, I have to say that at first I didn't like them too much, but my friend really liked them, so he kept bringing them up. By the end of the year, some of the songs have definitely warmed up to me a little bit more. But yeah,
how would you describe their sound, like their music?
Abrasive.
Yeah, like kind of. It's got like math rock influences, kind of like noisy, abrasive, and
yeah, they're a rock band, which you don't really get that much these days. They're like they have guitars in their music, like,
and like distortion. It's not like one of those like indie rock Mac DeMarco clones where it's just like all chill vibes, dude.
Okay, we're talking about Black Midi today. They have a new release called Black Midi Anthology Volume 1: Tales of Suspense and Revenge.
It's, I think, only available on Bandcamp. I don't know. I don't think this is like I don't think they'd consider this like their follow-up album to their first album. I think it's just some random stuff that they released. From what I can tell, it's just them playing music over like a reading of a short story, because all the titles of the songs are like titles of short stories. Like one of them's called Out of Season by Ernest Hemingway, one's Hop Frog by Edgar Allan Poe, and it's just them doing like spoken word over it. And I mean, I haven't read these stories, so I have to assume that what they're saying spoken word over it is the story.
Yeah. So they. Yeah, I wonder how the process that they did over here, whether they read the story to while listening to the music, or if they played the jam um, while listening to the story,
Yeah,
or if they're just two completely separate things that they just kind of combine together after the fact.
yeah, that would be interesting to find out. I mean, the only other thing I've seen there's probably other bands that have done this. The only other band that I know has done this is Velvet Underground. They had a song on the third album. No, it was the second album. White Light, White Heat, where it was like, what was the song called? The Gift. Where it was like an 8-minute long song where they were just reading a story that Lou Reed wrote and like jamming over it. I actually really like that song. But
there's that other song as well from them that kind of reminds me of the one. I don't know if they're reading a story, but like they're the one that is kind of just also spoken word with like music playing.
I can't remember any other spoken word song that they did.
There was maybe there's a little bit of singing in there, but it's the conversation. It's the Murder Mystery.
Yeah, it's the Murder Mystery. I hate that song.
I really like that song.
I hate it.
It's a nice way to like kind of like get to the end of the album, and I mean, and then After Hours is kind of like the.
I love After Hours.
It's kind of like the postscript.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what it reminded me of. This Black Midi project, definitely pretentious. But
I think they're doing it on purpose. Like,
right.
Black Midi has, like, I think they're kind of, they've done, like, trolling stuff before where they released a song called, like, Dead Sheeran, where it was kind of like a troll where they're, like making fun of Ed Sheeran in the song. Kind of, like, they've done trolling things before.
Right,
so.
right. And you know what, like, I'm glad that there's still rock bands out there that are, they're not really following any formula. They're just throwing stuff out there, just doing whatever they want. And who knows? Who knows what? Maybe this is a building point on something else.
Maybe all their music is just going to be them reading stories over songs, which I mean, if they do it well.
I hope not, but some of these are actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, the only song that we listened to in full was "Who Is to Pay" by Robert Trussell.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that one was the shortest one, and all the other songs are like 15 to 30 minutes long, and I'm not going to listen to those.
Right, well, the instrumentals seem pretty good at the very least. And they do have some instrumentals attached. The instrumental mixes, so if you don't feel like listening to the stories because, I don't know, you hate literature, then you can go back and listen to the instrumentals of the jams themselves.
Okay.
Alright. Next song is from Idols. And Idols is a band that has been around for a couple years now.
Their first album, Brutalism, came out in 2017.
And then they followed it up with Joy as an Act of Resistance.
In 2018?
Yes.
And I love that album. That's the album that really got me into Idols. I think if you don't know Idols, I would start with that album. They're I guess you would just say a punk band. Maybe post-punk.
Yeah, I guess post-punk is the most succinct way of describing it.
Yeah. I mean, post-punk's a terrible label because it kind of just says, like, post-punk can be a million things, but yeah.
Yeah, but it is very aggressive as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of noise. It's not a very clean sound at all. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of aggression that is...
Yeah, and this song that we're talking about is Mr. Motivator, released I think 2 weeks ago, and it's their first single, I think since 2018. And to me, it sounds a lot more like their first album, Brutalism, than it does their second album, Joy as an Act of Resistance, where it has, like, at least lyrically, it has, like, a, what's the word? Absurdist kind of, like, lyricism to it that was in the first album, where it's, like, they're kind of saying these just absurd things where he's, like, just saying, like, positive affirmations, like, you can do it, you can do all this stuff, and if you know Idols, you know that, like, a lot of the shit they say is just sarcastic and ironic. So, you know he's kind of, like, being an asshole a little bit.
Right.
And there was a lot of more of that kind of stuff on Brutalism than there was in Joy as an Act of Resistance. Joy as an Act of Resistance had more, like, songs with more focused topics on, like, on political issues and things like that, and he wasn't really just being, like, a dick the entire time, even though there's some songs on there like that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm learning a little bit about Idols over here. I mean, I'm mostly familiar with their sound, but yeah, no, this single definitely is in keeping with them. I would say.
Do you like it?
I do like it. I'm not gonna say it's like, I don't know, favorite of mine or anything like that, but I do like it. There's, even though there is generally a lot of noise and a lot of like unrefined vocals, there's still like a melody behind the music that carries it through.
Like beat and the driving sound, and it's kind of like, like pump up music kind of thing, like, hard rock kind of stuff.
Right. It does have a hard driving beat.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited for their next album. I loved Joy as an Act of Resistance a lot. I mean, I hope not every song on their next album is gonna be like this one, because I mean, this song's it's good. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's good. It's like middle of the road Idols to me. But I hope their next album, I'm still excited for their next album either way, because Joy as an Act of Resistance was an amazing album to me.
Hey, cool. So that pretty much wraps up the songs that we want to talk about this week, the new songs that have been coming out. So, as we said earlier, next week we're going to be talking about Tyler, the Creator, at a greater length.
Yes.
So you can definitely stick around for that. Hold your horses for that.
Also, follow us on social media. We have a Blood on the Mic Twitter account. Blood on the Mic 1 is the Twitter account, at Blood on the Mic 1. It's also an Instagram account, it's, at Blood on the Mic. Also follow me on Twitter, it's Torna Lewis, TORNALUIS. There's a lot of stuff about police brutality, so that's the only thing on Twitter right now, and, I see there's an important reason why.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like a relevant topic at the moment. And the Twitter, the Instagram, I think we're going to be mostly active on those. But, just wherever we're trying to make our podcast available on many platforms. YouTube, Apple, wherever it is that you guys.
It is available on all those platforms, so listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. I mean, you're already listening to us now, so you found the way to listen to us.
Right.
But also, get on social media and tell us what you want us to listen to. If you have any topics for us, we'll try to get to it if it's something we're interested in listening to, or even if we're not interested in listening to it. I mean, I like to make him listen to stuff he doesn't like.
And I'll listen.
Goodbye.
Alright, we'll see you guys next week.